Now I want to talk about the things that actually increase your sports performance and the things that will really make the biggest change in your overall sports performance and athletic performance, okay? And before I share this with you, okay, the Eastern training methods with you, I want to go over what's called the Pareto Principle. Now, Pareto was some economist back in the European days, and he discovered that 80% of the land that was in Europe was owned by 20% of the wealthy and the rich and the royalty, okay? The other 20% was owned by the poor people. And ever since then, there has been what's called the Pareto Principle, meaning that 80% of the efforts or the results that you'll get will come from 20% of the work that's being done, or the techniques or the strategies or the principles that you use. And it's the same thing, whatever business that you go into today, you'll see that that when I was at Gold's Gym, right, for example, we had over a dozen trainers there, but only 20% of the trainers had 80% of the clients at the gym, okay? The other 20% of the clients went to the other 80% of the trainers, okay? So this is the same way when it comes to sports performance. The reason why I mentioned this, I share this Pareto Principle with you, is that you can spend 80% of your effort on the gimmicks right here, such as the drugs and the supplements and the equipment, or you can spend 80% of your time focusing on improving your techniques, your strength, your endurance, your mindset, your plyometrics. The only problem is you're only going to get 20% of your improvement is going to come from this. 80% of your improvement will come from this over here, okay? Now, this is officially the first time that this has been presented on the internet and around the world, and in a manner that people can understand, okay? The reason why I know that is because it comes from a martial arts system called Wu Chi, okay? I'm gonna put it right here so that you'll know how to, right there, okay? This stuff here comes from a Chinese martial arts called Wu Chi, and in this martial art Wu Chi, the only thing that they focus on is increasing the human performance of how much power and force that the human body can generate as fast as possible, okay? This martial arts system was developed by pretty much by the people that had to guard the emperor or do assassinations for the emperor, okay? It's not going to be taught outside the U.S., outside of China. And the reason why I had the privilege to learn it was because through my instructor, who was a former U.S. Marine Recon Special Force, okay? He was able to learn it from some other people, through some diplomats and other special cases from China. It's a long story, but basically he's one of the few Americans that was able to learn this system, this military combat system, okay? And when I learned it from him, I never used it for military reasons or for combat reasons, okay? The only thing I use it for is for two things. It's to increase a person's sports performance, and the other one is to rehab and do physical therapy. And that's the reason why I've been authorized and I've been given permission to share some of these training principles with you. It's only because it's not being used in a combat or in a military arena, okay? And just to give you an idea, my instructor, his name was Jerry Rousseau. He's still alive and everything as the time of this video is made. And he was one of the guys that helped to protect President Carter during the stuff that President Carter was doing over there in Egypt, okay? I don't want to get into details about it because I'm not political, I'm not in the Marines, all I know is what I was taught by him, okay? And unbeknownst to him, I never used it for combat, not even for self-defense. I've always used everything he taught me for sports training and for physical therapy and rehab, okay? So here, I'm going to share this with you, okay? And this is going to be some very powerful stuff, guys. And I want you to sit down, buckle your belt, and open your mind up to something that's going to be very revolutionary, that's going to be very, it's going to really change your sports performance, okay? Trust me on this, okay? In the Eastern training, unlike the Western training, they do not have people that are 6'5", 7 foot tall like they do here in the Western world. In other words, I'm going to be one of the few Asians that you're going to meet that's, 5'11", that weighs 190 pounds, okay? Most Asians do not, stand my height. and especially 1,000, 2,000 years ago, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, they're not going to be able to employ these methods here, okay, like we do here in America. The reason why is because when someone is protecting the emperor, or someone is protecting a governor or somebody that's an important official in China, okay, they cannot afford to have like a really big person stand there and guard him. The reason why is because it's very obvious who he's guarding. So whenever they travel, they want to travel so that it's a light crew, a crew that's protecting the important individual. So they could not rely on strength, and they could not rely on being big and being strong to protect important people, okay? So because they were small people, they had to develop techniques to improve their power, their speed, and their strength that is just beyond just having big muscles, okay? So, for example, someone like me right here, they probably would not use to protect the important individuals, diplomats, governors, emperors, things like that in China, because I would stand out like a sore thumb, and it's not very good for protective services, okay? So here, right, in the Eastern training, they developed a system that follows. They said, okay, let's see how we can improve our sports performance, the performance of the human body to generate more power and to develop more speed and things like that, right? And so where they looked to was in nature, to see how nature generates power, generates force, and creates motion in the natural world. Like, how would a tiger come over and rip someone's head off, or you know, things like that. So what they figured out was that the way that power and force is generated in nature is through the use of arcs. Now, in the Western world over here, right, everything moves in what we call a linear system, okay? Meaning that we believe here in the US and in Europe and Australia, in the white man's world, let's just say, to be right, okay, is that to get from point A to point B, you have to go in a straight line, okay? Now, the problem with that concept and that theory that the Chinese figured out was that in nature, there is no straight lines. So if you're saying that, hey, to get from point A to point B requires a straight line, and you look at nature and there's no straight lines, not even a laser, it's supposed to be the straightest thing in the universe, even a laser is not straight, because when you shoot it out into space, the planets and everything will curve the laser and everything. So there's nothing in nature that is straight and is on a line. So the fact that you are trying to develop a speed or a power training principle based on the fact that it's a line, a straight line, you already screwed up. And that's the reason why that these techniques that I'm talking about over here were never discovered and have never been figured out in the Western world, because in the Western world, we think on a line, in a linear flat plane. Okay, like I'm talking about, like Columbus thought that the world, during Columbus's time, everybody thought the world was flat. Well, the Asians never knew that it was flat. They always thought it was round, because everything they looked in the universe was round, okay? So that's how they came up with the arc principles that they did, right, to develop power and speed, because they just copied what everything else, all the other animals in nature were doing, okay? Now, whenever let's say that I move my hand this way, like I'm moving my hands out like that. Now, in the Western world here, we think that my hand is moving in a straight line, okay? So if I'm moving this way, it's from point A right here to point B over here, it's a straight line. But the fact of the matter is that it's an arc that is being created by the upper arm here. It rotates up, and as this comes out, it creates an additional arc here. So 2 arcs are required to move my arm out here. Okay, so because of that, understanding how the arcs work in the human body is extremely critical. Because if you understand it, then what you can do is you can align your arcs to generate maximum power and speed in the human body. Okay, now in the West, because it's working on a linear system, all the sports training in the US and in Europe is based on a linear system. They're never going to come up with this. Okay, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, okay? If you're watching this, don't freak out and go, oh man, you're full of shit, Ty, you know, all that, okay? I'm just sharing this with you so that you know how to take advantage of what's being taught in the East, and you take advantage of what's being taught in the West, put it together, and that's where you'll get the maximum athletic performance, okay? So remember, first thing is that over here, they work off of a circular system, okay? A circular system is based on nature. So all the principles that I'm going to talk about here to increase your sports performance comes from nature. I didn't make it up. My instructor, Jerry Rousseau, did not make it up. The diplomats that taught his instructors, they did not make it up. They just follow what the rest of the animals in nature do, okay? Over here, a linear system, okay, is man-made. This concept of how to generate power is just man-made. There's no other animals in nature that move on a line like we do here in the US, okay? So let's go back over here to, now that you understand how arcs are, okay? So if I move my head up and down, that's an arc. If I move my upper body this way, it's the arc of the shoulder, okay? So just realize that the human body moves on arcs, not on a straight line, okay? The next thing is that if you prep, knowing how to, what we call prepping, or short, we just call prep, okay, is knowing how to prep the arcs of the human body. So for example, right, if I'm about to swing a baseball bat and I want to swing it with maximum power, how do I align the arcs in my human body, okay, so that I'm in the correct position? How do I arc my wrist? How do I arc my elbows, my shoulders, my vertebrae like this, okay, my head, everything, so that it's in proper alignment, so that when I wind up, when I unleash it, it's going to generate the maximum amount of force possible, okay? And not only will it generate the maximum force possible, but it also comes from aligning all the arcs in place, and it creates like a kinetic chain through the human body from your heels all the way up, right? And as everything arcs, it generates power, and it comes up through the ankles, it comes up through the knees, the hip, the spine, the shoulders, the elbows, and then it comes out and is released into the baseball bat, or the golf club, or the racket, tennis racket, or a sword, or a stick, or even if you're just punching someone, okay? So knowing this, how to prep the human body, okay, is very important. Now this is extremely, extremely critical, especially if you're playing a sport where you get to line up and set up first. And what I mean by that is that a sport such as mixed martial arts, MMA or something like that, you're not really able to just stand there and just set up. You have to be moving around and everything to fight the opponent. However, in sports such as football, baseball, golf, tennis, what else? Any sport where you can stand still and set up and wait for the play to begin, you need to know how to prep the arcs in the human body to give you maximum power and maximum speed when you make that move. In other words, if you're a lineman on the line and you have to hike the football and you need to move after you release the football, right? You have to know how to prep yourself so that as you stand up and you run into the defensive line or the offensive line or whatever, you generate the maximum force with the maximum speed possible. And that only comes from prepping your body in the right place, okay? So, and what happens is when you prep your body correctly, the next thing you need to do is know how to initiate force. Initiating force, here's an example of initiating force, okay? So if I want to move forward towards the camera, notice what happens to my body when you move in a linear fashion, okay? If I try to move towards the camera, remember, my goal is to move towards the camera, my whole body. However, when I actually do it, watch where my body goes. Did you see what happened? What happened? Let me do it again. As I make a move, notice how it goes this way first, and then it goes this way. So that is what we call initiating force. The fact that my body had to go this way to move forward, right, is a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. And to another professional athlete, if you do that, they'll spot it like that, okay? If you're a fighter, if you're a football player, if you're a lineman, any subtle move like that, even if it's just very subtle like this, your opponent will pick it up immediately and crush you on that, okay? Or they'll be able to anticipate what it is that you're doing, or you're telegraphing what you're doing to your opponent or to the opposing team or to your competitor, okay? So that's because in the West, they don't know how to initiate force correctly. In the East, when they initiate force, they always initiate force in the direction that they're going in. So if I want to move towards you, right, and I do this, notice how my body moves towards you. It doesn't go that way to go this way. Let me do that again for you so you can see it, okay? What I'm going to do is, instead of initiating force this way with my hip and shoulder, I'm going to do it with my hands and do like this. And notice how I move forward towards you. Hands and do like this.
Hands and do like this. Hands and do like this.
Okay? Yes, I move this way and my body is turned. However, right, that's because I'm moving on an arc. I'm not moving on a line, okay? Doing this to step forward is moving on a line because I'm going that way and then I'm going this way, okay? So that's what we call initiating force. Another example of initiating force is, notice how my eyes have to turn this way before my head goes that way. So when I turn my head this way, the human body naturally looks that way first before you can turn the head. You cannot turn your eyes this way and turn your head the other way, okay? Now this initiating force, in Asia we call it initiating force. It's also called, in Newton's laws of gravity, he calls it, I forget which one it is, but it's the one that says that a body will remain in motion until acted upon by an unbalanced force, okay? Or a different force acting upon it to move it from where it's at, okay? That's what initiating force is, okay? So before my big old head here can move this way, something smaller has to initiate it to go that way. So in order for my body to move forwards towards the camera, I can either initiate the force with my shoulder to move forward, or I can use my hands to initiate the force, and then I can move forward my whole body, okay? Now, why is this important? It's important because if you understand how initiating force works, for example, if I'm lined up at the line and I see the other lineman, I know from looking at how his arcs are prepped, I know which arc has to move first before he can come at me. So if I know that, I can actually reach out there and jam that arc, or what we call static that arc, or suspend it so that the opponent cannot move, so that I have a slight edge above him, okay? Now that edge may not seem like it's a big deal to you, but in the world of sports, good athletes, you give them a millisecond of time and that's all they need to crush you, okay? So that's why it's so important to understand how the arcs are lined up, because if you understand how to line up the arcs in your body to generate maximum speed, power, and force, you can look at the opponent and tell that his arcs are not lined up, right? And you can disrupt it and break that chain. And then if he's not prepped, you can, if you know how to prep your body to be in the right position, you can also reverse your opponent and prep him so that he's in the wrong position to produce maximum power and speed.